It's been more than a year since the Sundance Film Festival premiere of Train Dreams, the story of a 20th century logger who experiences love and loss while searching for his life's meaning in the Pacific Northwest. Some might say that sounds like a film we've watched 100 times before. But in the hands of Texas director Clint Bentley, it's shot with such stunning beauty and crafted with such care that it becomes impossible not to be swept up in its emotions. Bentley's movie is now nominated in 4 categories at the Academy Awards. And as we approach the Oscars on March 15th, I talked with Bentley about what went into making Train Dreams and how he managed to balance uncertainty and catharsis in a story that ultimately anyone can relate to. Clint, first of all, congratulations on the success that you and Greg have had so far with this film over the last year. So I talked with Greg last year over Sing Sing, and really great to be able to talk to you the other time of this collaborative partnership. First of all, it's been 13 months since Train Dreams is life cycle, for lack of a better term, since people started watching it, writing about it, seeing it, thinking about it, talking about it in depth. Can you just talk about what the last 13 months have been like for you? And does it feel like you're reaching a finish line with the Academy Awards next month?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think it's been very surreal, especially like starting. We were racing to the finish line to finish the film to get it to ready for Sundance, and I really didn't know how it would be received, and it was really a beautiful reception there. Um, and then since then it's just grown and it's been wild. Like I think there were times along the way, like before Toronto when we came back out, and then before our theatrical release, and then before like there were a few times along the way where I was like, I don't know, I was nervous because I was like, maybe like it won't be received well this time, you know?
Mhm.
Um and and it's just been like, I don't know, the love for the film has just grown and continues to. And I think like, yeah, on the one hand, next like 2 weeks from now, I guess it's a month from now, it is a finish line of sorts, but it also feels like the film will continue to grow in the world, and I'm really incredibly grateful for that as people continue to find it.
Absolutely. I have to apologize because my first question for you about the film is actually kind of a philosophical one, but it's just one that just kind of is at the forefront
That's
of
all
my
right.
mind
Yeah,
as
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
thinking about this movie and Train Dreams. My first question for you is, how do you view the natural world as it pertains to man finding its place in the world? And did that perspective change while you were making Train Dreams?
That's a good question. And it's always fun to like get one that's not just kind of the standard fare. Yeah, it wasn't so much that it changed in making Train Dreams, because a lot of that the film concerns itself with and talks about are things I wanted to like put out there in the world and put into the film.
Mhm.
And they were ideas that I've been like wrestling with for a long time. I feel like, our it's the tragedy of being a human, that we're wrestling with, is like that we feel somehow separate from the natural world, and as humanity in general. And I think that's the great tragedy, and but also an unnecessary one. We feel like we're so separate from things, and separate from the natural order of things, and I think we're seeing in very clear terms over the last 100 to 150 years, like what impact we're having that ultimately harms us. It's like burning down your own house, that you live in. Um, and One thing I think that uh, as I'm speaking, that I'm remembering from set, that like kind of struck me that I didn't think about before that, was like we had that cabin that Gladys and Grenier live in, and that log cabin was built by our production designer Alex Schaller and her team. They built this like fully functional log cabin that you could have moved into.
Yeah.
And a lot of us wanted to move into it. But there was something really interesting where when we were out there filming, where you weren't so disconnected from nature in that space. When it was hot, we opened the doors and opened the windows to let the breeze in. When it was cold, we closed everything up and lit the oven, the stove, and to kind of warm up the place. And you had pockets of put little space heaters in there, and you had pockets that would be warm. But you really felt influenced by the elements, and you had to wear a jacket or you had to take a jacket off. And then I would get back to my Airbnb at night, and if I was hot, I would just like press a button on the wall and make the air colder.
Right.
And there's something I think to that like we can we can forget how intertwined we are with everything in the world.
We just cut down trees that have been here for 500 years. Upsets a man's soul whether you recognize it or not.
I'll have $200 in my pocket tomorrow morning. Don't bother my soul. Not one damn bit.
That's because you Minnesota fellas don't know nothing about history.
That kind of harkens back to one of my favorite things I think has been written about this movie, which was I think the RogerEbert.com review, which is that you breathe train dreams, that you don't just watch it, you breathe it in, right, with all these textures and the way it's crafted. And that really harkens back to what I believe Greg has said about how you both wrote this during the pandemic. And then before getting down to brass tacks and truly starting production on the movie, y'all drove through Idaho. You drove through all these environments that Johnson himself would have inspired his novella, right? So in that sense, what was it kind of cathartic finally after COVID to get out and finally, when your boots on the ground making this movie, would you say that was a cathartic experience to be in that environment?
Oh yeah, man. I don't know. I think like I came out of COVID and out of the pandemic, just like very grateful for everything all over again. Just like like I was so grateful to go and travel. I was so grateful to go and see my grandmother without worrying about like, if I was going to accidentally kill her, and grateful for film festivals. And yeah, we all got on set, and we'd actually we had made Sing Sing at the tail end of like at the like still in COVID, but at the tail end of it, and just like the number of protocols we had to do with like everybody wearing masks that made it's already difficult enough to make a film, but it makes it so much more difficult. And then so to yeah, to be like really out of COVID and to make the film, it just felt like such a gift.
You obviously you can't talk about Train Dreams and really appreciate Train Dreams without appreciating what you and Adolfo achieved as far as the cinematography, right? And just the shot selection and just
Thanks, man.
how y'all were able to just achieve the balancing act of the environment in the movie feeling so much larger than just Grenier, but also while still syncing up pretty intimately with his emotional journey. To me, certain shots almost function like beats in the story, similar to how narrative pivots would, but instead of here in your movie, it's like shots. And I think of certain shots as almost like mile marker shots, like the shot of the first point of view shot where we're almost strapped to the tree falling, the wildfire smoke billowing into the sky. Was that the intention for you and Adolfo to have those kinds of like shots that just hit a little bit harder? Or was that kind of just organically going along with where the story is going?
Oh man, that's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. I we did you we did think about like those like banner shots that are going to be emblematic of a moment or a section, right? But not necessarily in where they would go, because that was a lot of that was found in me working with Parker Laramie, our great editor on the film,
Mhm.
and a lot of things moved around. Like that tree shot falling was like much later than it ended up being.
Mm.
Um, and uh and it just became clear it was too good to like wait on that shot. Um, but yeah, you're always looking for those shots to kind of like settle in, and shots that become bigger than what they are because of what's around them. And that's always like something you can only plan so much for. And you also don't always know what shots people are gonna like really connect with in ways.
Right, absolutely. We talked about how you and Greg kind of drove through Idaho to get a feel firsthand the literal environment that inspired the novella and is inspiring this movie. Can you talk about y'all's approach to kind of capturing that enormity of life in Grenier's environment in Train Dreams, knowing that people are inevitably going to watch it in whatever they decide to watch, whatever screen rather they decided to watch it on, whether it's in the theater, at home. So how do you capture that enormity of the world, knowing that you'll be inevitably constrained by the size of screen people decide to watch your movie on?
I honestly don't think too much about it,
Okay.
because I think like in terms of the smallness of the screens, and it's funny we talk about this as filmmakers and like um, we talk about like shooting things for the big screen,
Mhm.
and this one certainly like I think it's like obviously like that was in mind of like we wanted to like make it something to where it would it would reward you if you watch it on a big screen. I think any movie is better if you watch it in the theater, like of
Mhm.
course, you know. But
Mhm.
then I also like I know from just like growing up the way I consumed films mostly on VHS when I was a kid, you know, like and when I was coming up, um, where like a good movie is a good movie is a good movie and it functions on any screen. And it's funny as we're making our films as directors, we're holding a little monitor where we're watching it as we're shooting it, and it's just this big, you know, it's a little like 10-inch monitor
Yeah.
that you're watching it on. Um, and so you're just trying to get it to work there. But then also we Adolfo and I were conscious of this, but also Alex Schaller, our amazing production designer on the film, was integral in this as well, of like making the frame like putting little details into it uh that are going to reward you for seeing it on a big screen, you know, and
Right.
like there are things I think that like um might uh might not like come across very quickly
Mhm.
on a smaller screen in somebody's house.
Right. Absolutely. That makes sense. One of the
But at the
things I
same time,
also,
everybody's TVs are so big now, so maybe it doesn't matter.
right. That's true. That's true.
In the forest, every least thing's important. It's all threaded together, so you can't tell where one thing ends and another begins if you really look at it. The little insects you can't even see, they play a role as vital as the river. The dead tree is as important as the living one. There must be something for us to learn from that.
What if you got nothing left to give? What then?
One of the things I also kind of appreciate about your movie is that there's almost a certain tension between when we see certain flourishes throughout the film of modernity encroaching, like the shot of the bridge in the distance with cars zooming by it while Granier is on the train, and closer to the end when he finds himself in the city in the more urban environment, kind of
Yeah.
completing that transition. And I kind of appreciated how destabilizing that felt, because it almost felt intentionally like he just time traveled decades in the future, when really it's just in a movie that where you've captured the natural world so well, any sign of modernity and civilization is kind of almost kind of destabilizing. Toward the end, I kind of thought about the uncertainty of things coming in our world, like the big thing right now that everyone's talking about is AI. I
Yeah.
it's not really a question, but just kind of a reflection on, did you think about how destabilizing it would feel finally moving into civilization, but also knowing that that's where Granier ultimately finds his catharsis by movie's end?
Yeah, it's a good question. I did like I wanted it to feel that way. That was very intentional, that it felt like this guy time traveled forward, you know,
Yeah.
um and that you know when we flash forward in the beginning of the film, when we flash forward to see it in the bridge, that was something that came very late. Um and very late in the edit, that
Mm-hmm.
like taking that shot and like kind of giving us a preview of what's to come. But I definitely wanted it to feel like, yeah, you're with this guy, you're in this world, and that he not only he time travels forward, but you do as well. And there's something I think like I also wanted to get I didn't want it to feel as simplistic as, you know, modernity bad,
Sure.
you know, tradition good or whatever.
Right.
Because there are some things sprinkled throughout the film as well. One of the characters dies, and you know the narrator says had he been born a generation later, his heart condition would have been easily diagnosed and cured. Um, And there's things like that even now as we're struggling with what's happening with AI. And I was reading some articles this morning that are just like incredibly troubling. Um, but it's also like it could potentially cure cancer, and it's mapping all the proteins that we know of. Like it's wild. Um, and so there's this real paradox of like moving forward in time on a bigger level as like we're gaining a lot from technology, but we're also losing a lot in the same way that I think we all experience it as individuals, where we move forward in life and uh, as the poet goes, though much is taken, much abides, and we lose a lot, but we gain a lot along the way.
I also have to ask, Clint, seeing as I'm based at Kent's 5 station in San Antonio,
Right.
I have to ask, given the time that you've spent in Texas, firstly, so just to make sure I understand clearly, how long have you lived in North Texas at this point?
Well, I don't know. Several years now.
Okay, okay. In the Dallas area, correctly,
Yeah.
specifically. Okay. So I naturally also thought about, this state's own natural diversity, right?
Yeah.
Did you consider did that do you think that might have impacted you at all or influenced you at all while making this movie, and or maybe largely how has Texas natural diversity influenced your own art and filmmaking?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I think like with this film, there's so specifically Washington, and this is maybe a roundabout way to answer it, but like this film is so specifically set in Washington, and I feel like a lot of times Washington on film looks a very specific way. A lot of times because people are shooting in British Columbia, pretending that it's Washington so they can get tax rebates, but in the past, but like it's a very like Washington is incredibly in the same way that Texas is. Washington is incredibly geographically diverse and is its natural elements are incredibly diverse. And you've got all these microclimates throughout the state, like at least four, if not five of them. And so I really wanted to like represent that with the film of showing the different feeling of different forests and all the different sides of the state.
In Train Dreams, you see almost the range, obviously not just of a single environment, but what a single environment can go through, right? It can be peaceful, it can be
Yeah,
joyous, it can undergo devastation. So I think that's kind of a key part of what y'all captured as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Clint, this has been great, sir. Thank you so very much.
Great to
Congratulations
meet you,
again
David.
yeah, nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
Congratulations on again on the success you've had with Train Dreams, and
Thank
and good luck going forward and at the Academy Awards next month.
thank you.